Good morning, everyone. I'd like to open this Polk County Board of Commissioners. It is August 18th. All commissioners present. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First up is comments for not on this agenda. Would you like to address the board? Seeing none. Looking for approval of agenda.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. Approval of minutes from August 11th, 2026.
I'll move approval.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye, motion passes. That brings us to the topic of the day, public safety levy discussion. Mr. Greg Hansen.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. Beginning preparation for the public safety levy that we will be going out for in May of 27. We've talked one or two times at the board level without bringing in the major players, which is the sheriff, the DA, community corrections as the primary recipients of this funding. As you know, we are in a budget crisis, maybe not crisis, but we are fiscally constrained in the general fund as we speak for this fiscal year. Obviously, next fiscal year would be much worse if we are unable to reauthorize the public safety levy. I gave the players a spreadsheet with a number of options in it. The major beginning of that spreadsheet is the assumptions that we need to make for the upcoming levy. There's two components of the levy, well, probably three, but the first is how much will the assessed value grow in the next 5 years? We have the assessor here. She knows it for sure what it's going to be, but we've been averaging between about 3.5 and 4% the last 2 or 3 years. I'm not anticipating that it grows bigger than that, but it could. It could grow less than that. Hopefully not. But in the spreadsheet, I utilized 3.5% growth. And then the next component that you have to figure out is what are your expenses going to increase over the period of time? I've used 8%. You could go as high as 10%. You could go as low as 6%, but I chose 8%. What this levy will experience is 3 PERS increases beginning January or July 1 of 2027. Then there'll be another PERS increase in 29, and then there'll be another increase in 31. So you'll have 3 of those. You'll have health insurance increases, which are averaging, if we have a good year, just a little under 10%. If we have bad years, they could project as high as 12 or 13%. You also have cost of living increases. You also have step increases for your employees and that. And this levy is a employee-based levy. It's not a materials and services type of levy. We aren't including really the increased in health and costs in the jail. Probably in the last 5 years, it's gone from $400,000 to $500,000 to about $1 million to just cover inmates in the jail. Will that trend continue? Hopefully not at that rate, but it becomes a costly element that we have to absorb in our operations. We just can't turn off the health insurance ticket in the jail and that. So with that said, I think all of the people involved in this levy are aware that the levy amount from the 49.5 cents that we have currently will need to increase, and will need to increase significantly over the next reauthorization. And as a result, I've given you 6 options. There could be 20 options if you want, but I'll start with option 1. Option one is basically a status quo levy. It is exactly the same levy that we have in place and currently, and we've had in place the previous levy than the one we're in today. With that levy, you're probably going to have to increase it from 49.5 cents to 65 cents per thousand for the reauthorization. And that will fund 19 individuals in the sheriff's office, 5 individuals in the DA's office, and provide for juvenile detention beds and community service. The 19 individuals in the sheriff's office is, I think, 14 for patrol, 4 for the jail, and 1 control room tech. In the DA's office, I believe it's 3 prosecutors and 2 support staff legal secretaries. And in, like I said, in juvenile and community service, it's detention beds and additional funding for community service, which provide a lot of court volunteered labor for us to utilize to do maintenance in our parks and those kind of things. So that is the status quo budget. Option 2 has very little modification. It's just an increase of $50,000 in the juvenile and community service column. That increases your cost of about a half a cent up to 65.5 cents per thousand. Again, not much increase if you want to increase $50,000. The next option has a backfill for community corrections funding. I'll give you a little history. Community corrections is funded primarily through something that occurred in the late 90s, which was 1145 Senate bill. That's where the state provides funding from the Department of Corrections to community corrections. They've had modifications and iterations of formulas and that over that time period. And they had one element as part of that legislation that they couldn't drop below a baseline funding for all counties. They did drop below that baseline funding once, and 2 counties opted out. That was Lynn County and Douglas County, I believe. All the other counties have their own state funding, and that has been getting tougher and tougher to be provided by the state. We've had to lay off probation officers. Actually, I don't know if we laid off. We have not backfilled openings in the community corrections department. And I foresee that that funding will continue to tighten up. So if you want to maintain community corrections funding in the future, you're probably going to have to add that element to the public safety levy, which has not been there before. Option number 4, and these are just different combinations of the same. It basically adds 2 probation officers instead of 1. That would probably increase your cost of the levy up to 69.5 cents. The previous one was going to raise it up to 67.5 cents. And all these next options are going to be a 69.5 cent type options. If you wanted to increase community corrections by 2 FTE or $300,000, it's going to be 69.5. Different combination of that 69.5 would be 1 police officer or 1 deputy sheriff and 1 parole and probation officer. That gets you still at 69.5 cents. So if you wanted to add 1 to the sheriff's office for patrol or detectives or whatever within the sheriff's division, you could stay within the 69.5 cents. Another option is adding a 1 probation officer and 1.5 FTE in the DA's office. That the 1.5 FTE would be a half-time medical officer. There's already funding in the budget for the other half. And then you would add an investigator within the DA's office. So all those are different options. These are, again, are preliminary spreadsheets, but thought it was time to bring in the sheriff, the DA, community corrections to talk about their departments, to talk about their needs. The one thing you have to remember is this levy lasts you 5 years, maybe 4, but at least 5 years. And you need to think about not only what you need today, but what you might need in the future. But you also have to remember that we have to pass this levy. So any type of increase will be tough on the taxpayer, and how they react to that is unknown at this time. But that will be a final decision by the board of what level they will have to levy, and then it'll be up to those departments, excluding community corrections, to help go out and provide information and sell this to the public of why it's needed or not needed. So I can open the floor. I can answer any questions right now, but you may want to hear from the departments just what they need. I'll give you an example. If you increase that expense category from 8% to 10%, you automatically probably increase your levy amount by 3.5 cents. If you lower it to 6 cents or 6%, you would decrease it by 3.5 cents. That's what 2% means on the expense side. Obviously, if you increase the growth of the assessed value, if you increase it to 4%, you can lower your tax rate by that. All those are gambles. This last levy we missed, and we are hurting because of that. You know, we probably should have been, instead of 49.5 cents, and in reality, looking back, we probably should have been closer to 55.5 cents. And then we wouldn't be where we are in the general fund today. But it's a guessing game, and anyone can criticize or applaud what assumptions we make, but they are assumptions. We don't know exactly how much the increase is, how much the growth is. The thing we do know is we do have cost elements that are going to increase. Health insurance is, unless there's major reform that I have never heard of, is going to increase dramatically as we get further into the future, and PERS will increase, it will not decrease. And you're probably looking at minimum of 2.5%, maximum of 4.5%. Can't tell you. Every percent in payroll for the whole county is about $350,000. So every 2 years, you're going to have most likely $1 million hit just to cover PERS. That's not just in the general fund, but countywide. So those are the elements you have. Like I said, I can answer any questions. Putting the numbers together are not that hard, but knowing what we need and getting input from the recipients of this money is probably more important.
So this is a good jumping off point. There's a lot more to do in my view, but in order to get, for me to get alongside you on the things you all quoted, I need to see it in writing. So your 8% increase, I'd like to see, you know, an average, you know, on paper over the minimum, at least last 5 years, maybe you know, two levy cycles.
Okay.
Okay. I want to see the average of what those expenses are. And then the same on the growth side, an average over the last 2 levy cycles. So we can use those in part of our talking points, et cetera, going forward about this is reality. This is not just Mr. Hansen. This is what we're actually seeing. And though I appreciate your gut instinct on all of these things, I still want to see what it is, because we're going to have people saying, well, it's just BS. Well, it's not. I mean, again, if we're looking at these averages as we go forward, I think it's important for all of us in elected positions to understand this isn't rhetoric. This isn't something that we're doing from emotion or passion. These are real numbers. And then I also want to have some sense as we go forward about, what kind of tools we'll have, no matter what number we pick, to throttle back. And again, when you're hiring people with increased taxes and it doesn't work out, that means you're going to let people go too.
Yep.
So I want to understand, again, our strategy, it's going to be a ways out, but what tools we have to throttle back. So to simply say, if you don't pass this level, we'll have to lay these people off, isn't an effective strategy for selling a tax increase. So any of these options that talk about hiring more people, to me, is risky. And I think anybody who knows they have to face a taxpayer and convince them to raise their taxes, if you put in that we're going to hire more people part, they're going to say why. So we need to have a really good reason for doing that, obviously, and the other folks in the room are going to explain that. But we also need to know if we're wrong about, because as you said, PERS, we have no way of knowing. All we can do is look back. And the growth, I mean, again, it's a crapshoot. I look at the stock market every day and keep wondering, when is this bubble going to burst? And when it does, and it will, it's going to have a huge impact on all government agencies. So this 3.5% growth might look like the best scenario we've ever seen once that happens. So how will we throttle back? We just need to be aware of that and be willing to talk about that. So I want to see more of it in writing so that
Now,
we have it in our pocket.
I would love to provide you with that, but you got to remember, we experienced COVID and all those numbers mean nothing.
Yeah, true.
I mean, you had a sheriff's office who couldn't hire people. You had a DA's office who couldn't hire people 5 years ago. So we had open positions we couldn't even fill. It's not the case anymore, but giving you a history is going to be just not relevant because of COVID.
Well, that asterisk matters, of course,
Right.
but we also have to be prepared to explain that and state it again when we're trying to make good decisions based on averages and history. That's an important element to have in there.
You
fouls everything up.
Yeah, you had 32 people in the jail during COVID instead of 132.
Mm-hmm.
So food costs obviously lower.
You probably don't want to open that litigation for some of us because there could have been a lot more.
No, but I'm just saying the numbers are going to reflect so much lower of cost than were actual cost. So it'll be hard. I mean, you're going to have asterisk all the way through. So I would love to provide that, but I don't know how much it's going to help you, but I will provide it.
Yeah.
So that's just the reality of what we experienced and, messed things up.
Commissioner Horton?
I think I would find that those historicals helpful too, just as part of the historical context, even if they're not predictors of what we're going to assume going forward. I think it's helpful. And of course, PERS and health costs are going up at a rate that we haven't seen. I don't know what's the last time you've seen the rate of increase.
Yeah. PERS is not going to be, it's going to be an increase. I guarantee it's going to be an increase. It depends on if the PERS board decides to kick the can down the road, which they've done on higher increases. And then this last year was the lowest we've experienced in the last 5 or decade of PERS increases, but we've experienced 4.5%, and it should have been 6 or 7%, but they just kick the can down the road on unfunded actuarial liabilities and all those things. But I can provide, a history of everything you're asking for. I just hope that you got to remember the context that it might be in too.
Yeah.
PERS won't be in, health insurance won't be that big a deal, but expenses could be.
For sure. Just to kind of echo Commissioner Pope's point about reevaluating these assumptions and whatever levy amount we decide to ask voters to pay. I would love to, every budget cycle with the budget committee, look at how well our assumptions are matching reality, both in terms of expenses and growth in revenue, obviously, and then, other unexpected revenues in timber receipts or whatever to sort of really pause in that section of the budget conversation and evaluate every year before we approve that, whatever levy amount we are allowed to levy. So, but I would love to see some consensus with these assumptions so that we have a baseline to move forward. But yeah, I don't have any questions now. I've looked over these various scenarios, spent a lot of time on the community corrections issue through the Association of Oregon Counties. And as folks know, despite conducting a rate study to look at actual costs of services across the state, the legislature actually devoted less than maintenance of effort funding. So that was cuts across the board. That is a risk I worry about because that is of the various segments of our public safety system, that one is most dependent on that state funding and carries a special kind of risk. So just want to note that before we continue. I have no other questions.
Just reviewing the current levy we're in right now, knowing it didn't fulfill the full 5 years. We're in the end of the third year. We have 2 deputy positions we can't fill because we can't afford it because it didn't get enough of the levy. DA's offices, they finally got staffed, and for so long you're so understaffed because we couldn't hire, so we made those adjustments, which is so critical to the quality of life, keeping our communities safe, our roads, speed limits reasonable. We need those bodies, and when the police officers bring them in, we need the DAs to prosecute. And on the backside of that, the incarceration is not the mantra for the state. In Polk County, we hold that very dear. We're not afraid to put people in jail, but at the same time, the early releases that puts more pressure on our probation officers, and their funding just keeps getting cut and reduced. The state mandate of unfunded mandates gets so frustrating. It just puts us tighter and tighter. But this levy directly relates to our quality of life that we expect in Polk County. And I would like to hear from each of our department heads what you're experiencing at this time. And this is much for us as it is for the public. What your views are moving forward, what we need in this next levy. And we'd like to hear from each one of you on, so we make the right decision on this as a team. So would one of you like to come up and lead the way? We
need them all
3. Yeah, come on up.
While they're coming up though, I appreciate everything you said is accurate. We still keep giving raises, and we're giving raises, and that's part of this 8% increase. Okay. And so, and no fault of anybody, but it is the way of life here in order for us to compete with our neighbors and the job market. And so at some point, and what we all have to deal with here is whatever number we choose, if it does not pass, well, first, before it not passing, what are we going to tell people that they're going to lose if they don't approve this? Whatever the number is, we all have to be on the same page of music here with regard to saying what we're going to change, because we're going to go back out again in less than a year or a year for one shot more before this current levy runs out. And so, to go out again, we have to be honest about, what we're going to change, what we're going to cut. And so that's the other part of all this, that, whatever number we choose, we have to be willing to be honest with people and say, okay, if you don't approve this, this is what we're going to do immediately following that. So that's also an important piece. I'm very concerned about all of this. And I mean, the community corrections funding, help me with this, Mr. Hanson, that we're moving from a state paid program to a property tax paid program in community corrections as we continue to increase this and show that we need to supplement community corrections with property taxes.
If you decide to backfill the potential loss
Right.
that most likely.
Well, I'm just
Right.
adding on here to what's being said. I mean, the bottom line is we don't use property taxes for that.
That is correct.
And now we're talking about adding more property tax responsibility for something that the state is supposed to be paying for. And I don't mind saying this as loudly as possible as we go forward to everybody in the room. We need to be really careful here. Why would we put these burdens on the backs of our property taxpayers? People need to vote differently here. They need to change the way they think about who's running the state of Oregon, because this issue should not even be on the table here today. We should not even be talking about this. So, and the same with the DA's office in some regards.
Oh, definitely. When I first started here, the DA's was almost entirely funded
So,
by.
but as a property
by the
taxpayer, I'm tired of getting burdened with the responsibilities of the state of Oregon. And they continue. It's a clear pattern. Slough off the responsibilities of the legislature and the governor's office onto local property taxpayers. And that wasn't the plan. So I just want to make sure that we're all clear on that. We need to be forceful in this message and be willing to tell people, it's like, this is what your state is doing to you. And in order for you to have that quality of life and those bodies that you need to make your community safe, this is where we are. This is what they're forcing us to do. This isn't our choice. This is the choices that we're forced to make in order to be able to help you live a safe life. So I'm sorry, that soapbox, but at some point we have to be honest about telling people what the consequences will be if they don't approve this. And this will be hard. Thank you.
Welcome. And thank you. Spot on. And before we get started, Mr. Hanson, you could explain to us the personnel that is in the current levy that this covers?
The current levy, like I said, has 19 bodies in the sheriff's office, 14 of them which reside in patrol, 4 in the jail, and 1 control room tech, which resides in the jail. In the DA's office, you have 3 prosecutors and 2 legal secretaries. And in the juvenile / community service budget, you have detention beds and community service personnel. I didn't assign FTE for that one. In the 4th column, which hasn't been funded, that would be community corrections backfill that the state currently pays for, but has recently had signs that they will continue to squeeze that amount down. And as a result, you may be forced to not conduct business as you have in the past unless it is on the backs of our taxpayers. I agree with Commissioner Polk. When I first started here, the DA's office was funded at a much higher level through the state. They weaned us off that. Community corrections, same pattern. It is a pattern of the state, and they start programs or say they're going to pay for them and then whittle that down over time. You have that with the fairgrounds. We're supposed to get 1% lottery money. We're getting 0.3% lottery money. You know, they say they're going to give you 1% in July of 27. I will not put it in the budget till I see the check land in our bank account. So it's a pattern that the state has done to push it on the backs of the counties, either by adding new rules that the county has to pick up without backfilled funding, or they just reduce the amount of funding that they were providing in the past. So
just one more soapbox comment. Sorry, the floor will be all yours. But just what I've noticed, learning from other counties, looking at these trends and how challenging they are and how much effort we've all spent advocating for adequate state funding, knowing that the sheriff's office receives very little, if nothing, outside of grants for his operations. But this county does more with less. People here are very satisfied and happy with their public safety system, their sense of security and responsive services. And that's something we have to maintain, I think, bottom line. But I also want to commend this Board of Commissioners, the history of the decisions made here, and all of you for how well you work together and the level of service you provide, despite having less resource than our neighboring counties and the like. So just had to get that off my chest.
Okay. Seeing our frustrations, let's hear go. Who would like to start? Aaron?
Well, Commissioner, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners, I use the term soapbox, and I don't I don't qualify it as such. I think you were outlining the present state of public safety throughout Oregon in terms of the resource allocation from the state to the county. And really seeing it today, and I'm going to talk about Ms. Merritt's department for a second, and even though it's not mine to do really, but it does in stark numbers illustrate something I think I've talked about in front of this board before, and I've certainly talked about it informally with others. Just the shifting of the burden from the state in terms of a very important public safety issue in the way my work and the work of other prosecutors in the state in terms of sentencing translates, because it's hard to send people to prison in Oregon. There's this grid we work with where there's a black line on it. Above the black line on the sentencing guidelines, felony sentencing guidelines grid, people go to prison. Below that, they get community supervision. And that's a very distinct intention by the legislature. And that's okay. You know, the most violent, dangerous people are meant to go to prison in Oregon. And that's the philosophy. But if you don't go above that line, you're meant to be supervised in the community. And a lot of people who you might otherwise think ought to go to prison or otherwise be incarcerated are supervised in the community. And that's a bargain that's been made. That's a deal that was basically set by the legislature. But in my opinion, over time, sort of the legislature has cut back on their end of the deal by cutting funding for community supervision, by cutting funding for parole and probation officers in Ms. Merritt's office. And now just seeing that in order to, for this, you know, what we're saying to our community is in order to have an adequate level of parole and probation officers, we're going to go to our taxpayers, our county taxpayers, and have you dip into your pocket to pay for a little bit more and supplement that. Is stark illustration of what's happening from the state in terms of they're not living up to their end of the deal. Again, there's a lot of folks who, from my perspective, and I'm not going to get into the examples, ought to be above that black line, ought to be going to prison for what they do. But we say, okay, you're going to be supervised in the community. That supervision ought to be intense. It ought to be regular. There ought to be adequate numbers of POs in community supervision to be available for that. But it's been slowly eroded away. Much the way I would say, now I'm going to quote soapbox, but I don't think it is. It's something I've said for a long time, is that right now there's a lot of comment in this last few years about the public defender, quote, crisis. Well, I will say there's a public defender shortage, and I've said there's not a crisis statewide because it doesn't exist throughout the state. Certainly in some counties and there's about 4 counties in Oregon. Multnomah is one of them, some of the larger counties. And I will tell you, it is a crisis if you're incarcerated and you don't have a lawyer. That is a very individual crisis, and that needs to be addressed. But it's not a statewide crisis, even though the term has been legislated into the bill. But there is a shortage, and that does need to be addressed. But I will tell you, what is a crisis that needs to be looked at by the state, by the legislature, is a crisis in public safety that affects prosecutors. Prosecutors throughout the state, there is a shortage. If you go out to Lake County, Morrow County, other places that are having a hard time attracting prosecutors, that is a crisis in terms of the type of justice someone may get in a county as, quote, on the frontier, as my friends, other elected prosecutors call it, but out there. But even in Lane County, they're having a hard time getting prosecutors where people think they have so much money. That is the pending prosecution crisis for the future. That is the future public safety crisis that is happening. And I think it's a matter of due process. If a crime victim can't get the same level of justice and prosecution because an officer is having a hard time attracting prosecutors, retaining prosecutors, and that is really not the only question. How do you attract good prosecutors? It's keeping them. Same thing you're doing, same problem you have in law enforcement. I'm talking to the sheriff here. For those who are listening, it's retaining folks and keeping good folks in your office. And take it back to our issue in the county our size. The question's always been how do we attract people, prosecutors, to come to Polk County? How do we keep them? Right now we're in a good place because we have a good crew of prosecutors that has been with us for a few years. We've been able to find ways to keep them, build a culture to keep folks and retain them for a few years. But over the history, it's been a matter of we've been able to retain folks, But we are challenged that we're nestled amongst other counties, Department of Justice, Marion County, and folks that pay more. And we have a hard time keeping folks because of the salary competition that we have with other folks. But right now we have a good core of, we have 8 total prosecutors, including myself and my chief deputy who's here in the room as well. And we're able to keep those folks and keep them energized by a culture that includes our staff. And that's what the current levy pays for. But what I'm telling folks, what we're going to be asking for and why we've asked that these other positions be considered is what we don't have is what some other counties do have, which is an investigator. An investigator focused on prosecution issues for larger, all cases really, is invaluable to us. It is a cost savings measure. And I've brought this before the budget committee a couple times. I've talked to commissioners about it. And a district attorney's office investigator, which is focused solely on our work. I'll tell you where the money that's being paid by the state is going to the defense side. Very often will come up in court, especially in a homicide case. Mr. Wilson right now has one next week going to trial. At other cases, and I had one a couple of weeks ago, we got a conviction on a murder that happened right here in Dallas. They have 2 investigators on their cases. Or often that will come into court and just even on a misdemeanor case, they'll have an investigator paid for by the state. They'll come into court and say, oh, my investigator is just getting going on things, and will extend the life of a case out till the cases get older and witnesses go away. We very much need an investigator just to keep pace with what is happening on the defense side so that we can have witnesses interviewed, so we have subpoenas served. So we're not asking sheriff's deputies to do it. Detectives from the sheriff's office who have a different function often have to do it on overtime, which costs the county more. We can save the county by having money, by having someone strictly devoted to the work that we do. So it's a cost savings, it's an efficiency issue. It will make our cases better prepared to go to trial, have the information we need just for follow-up. And if anyone, I know folks out there don't do this kind of work, but oftentimes information develops as we go. If we have someone in our office devoted that can go out and follow up, develop the information in real time, rather than having to ask follow-up from the individual law enforcement agency, sheriff's office, our local agencies, that will make us better and will increase the culture that we have. We're also asking for a full-time medical examiner position. Well, actually half-time to complement the half-time we already have. So we have one person. Right now we have sort of an ad hoc system of people who work hourly for us. And oftentimes we have one individual taking most of the hours and other people on backup. It isn't always efficient, but it's the best we have right now. We could be more professional, and sometimes we don't always have people on call, and we've had to make up the difference, and sometimes we don't have someone on call. So again, that would make us a more professional office and more uniform and more consistent with what other offices have around the state. That would be a healthier, more efficient, more professional office. And Mr. Hanson talked about 5 years down the road. Again, the levy as we currently are keeps us consistent with what we can do. We're at a place right now where we're able to review every case that comes in. We don't have an artificial do not prosecute list. Doesn't mean we file and everything, but we're able to review every case that comes in from law enforcement. And that's a good place for us to be. We're able to make good decisions about cases, not have an artificial limitation on what we can do. And that is a good place to be. We're able to be in a place where misdemeanors, shoplifts and other cases like that, we're able to follow through in those cases and get good results for our merchants and our neighbors. So that is a good place for us to be. I wouldn't want to go back from there, and that's primarily because we have the staffing to do it. So that is where we are, and that is a healthy place for our prosecution to be. Now, I'm going to finish by saying, since the beginning that we've done these levies, and we've had the support of Polk County people, Polk County residents, Polk County voters who have always been supportive of law enforcement. Always, Polk County folks have done it, but they've been thrifty. They've always been careful with their money. Fortunately, the majority of Polk County people never work with my office because Polk County law enforcement keeps this a safe place where they don't need to work with the DA's office. But we also know when you do have a situation, unfortunately, when you may have to work with the DA's office, if you're a crime victim, you really need to work with the DA's office. And you want our services to be efficient, timely, and there for everything you need. This levy keeps us there. We want to continue to be able to provide that level of service. I respect that times are hard. I respect that nothing's getting cheaper or easier financially. But I think this is a service that people have benefited from and keeps the baseline of public safety. And I think all three of us do that in the way we've put into place the services that we provide. So I thank the support of this commission. I consistently am grateful and remember the support of the Polk County citizens in voting this levy and paying a little bit more out of their pockets. Thank you, commissioners.
No questions.
Yes, sir.
Go ahead, Commissioner Pope.
So what option do you choose?
I'm going to choose the option, I think it's option six. It's the option 6.
And if on the first attempt, going out for option 6, if it doesn't pass, what will you cut?
If option 6 doesn't pass, does that mean
Well, any levy opportunity, if it doesn't pass, no matter what the number is,
Mhm.
I mean, to go out again,
Well, if there's no levy, we lose 3 lawyers and 2 staff people.
well,
Three lawyers?
3 lawyers and 2 staff people. That is what the current levy, if we have no levy.
we'll have one more year.
Okay,
Yeah.
if we go out for another
See the
levy,
scenario here, you got to go back out again.
scenarios, we go back out. It's a degree. I want to go back out with an investigator again. We're talking about 5 years down. I think that is a critical piece that we keep coming back to. Would not only save the county money overall, would make us a better office. We're doing an addition. If we strike 2, we have no levy. We're going to lose 3 lawyers and 2 staff people. We're going to have to do violent crime only with violent felonies, and we're going to have to make some cuts in the misdemeanor area of as to what we can do. Fortunately, victims assistance is primarily grant funded from the feds, so is child support. But it's going to be very, very difficult in our criminal prosecution to do the same degree of misdemeanors. I mean, I feel very strongly about the commitment that we make to our local businesses and people in terms of misdemeanor crimes of quality of life crimes, it's trespassing, disorderly conducts, criminal mischiefs, those types of things that give, I think, just a general feeling of safety. When I ask a person, do you feel safe? And they give me that answer. That's primarily translated through, can I walk in my neighborhood at night? Can I take my kid to the park? Can I go shop? Can merchants say, can I stock my shelves? Are things running out of my shop, being carried out in bundles? That sort of thing. Those quality of life crimes, it's going to make it much harder. We're going to have to look at some other options that some different counties do where they don't prosecute first or second, that sort of thing. We're still going to seek the types of sentences we do. I don't know how it would affect the jail or community supervision, but it's not going to change our sentencing philosophy because I think incarceration is an important component of accountability.
Mr. Gordon?
Quick question on the medical examiner piece. I wonder if you could unpack that service. For the
Sure.
public's benefit, I learned a lot about the major deficits in Eastern Oregon. Multiple counties with vast geographies sharing a single person.
Of course.
So if you could unpack that a little bit.
Medical examiner is a statutory duty in which suspicious deaths are investigated at the field level by a medical, it's a huge word, medical legal death investigator. And ultimately they go through the state medical examiner's office. But on the field, someone goes out, it's a separate, in our office, it's part of our office, it's part of our budget. So that individual goes out onto death scenes. There's certain statutory class of types of deaths they investigate. They don't investigate like hospice deaths, attended deaths, but unattended deaths. They go out and investigate the cause of deaths. And we work with them collaboratively, but again, I keep saying they're an independent state agent and make a preliminary determination of the cause of death. we rely upon that individual in terms of their expertise when we make a call along with law enforcement as to whether a death is suspicious or not. And then they work independently with a MD that we pay a service or contract with, who signs the death certificates, and they make determination with the state medical examiner ultimately whether a body needs to be held for autopsy or other things about the cause of death. So it's integral to our work, the relationship we have with that individual as to whether we're going to go on a scene, what the cause, if it's suspicious, whether we hold that scene, all those things. So right now, we have run it where we have a number of folks who work part-time, hourly, and we pay a contract to them to do that. It could be better if we had a full-time person doing that rather than relying we'd also work out a backup service because that person would need to go on vacation, that sort of thing. But right now we have people that sign up for hours. They'll take so many hours, they'll sign up for weekends and that sort of thing, shift work basically. We've had some glitches in that where someone hasn't been able to get those hours and that sort of thing. So to me, I'm looking for a more uniform system where I can rely on somebody full-time for that. They can get benefits and be paid as an employee, basically. And I could attract perhaps a different type of candidate in that regard. So
Mary, if workload increases beyond the 0.5, 60K we currently spend on that contracted service, risks to the public are delayed examinations.
correct.
Backlogs that could cause distress.
Correct.
From family members, from your work as an investigator, as a prosecutor and investigators.
Correct. Having an experienced person who, with a knowledge of medicine causes of death, help us right at the preliminary scene, because we're very engaged in that preliminary death scene in terms of what might be a suspicious death, making that call. So having someone experienced, regular that we can rely upon to make an independent judgment of that is invaluable to the work we do in terms of determinations of suspicious deaths, which may ultimately become potential prosecutions.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson. What would the increase to full-time in-house staff person be in terms of a levy addition?
Yeah, one full-time, one part.
I said we're at 60K now for the contracted service.
You would probably have to have, it's going to be less than a penny.
Subject.
To provide the full-time and the part-time.
We're just talking the ME right now,
ME.
not the investigator.
Yep.
So
Add the investigator in that.
if you added the investigator, you're going to add a little over 2 cents, 2.5.
Just for reference, our baseline to maintain service levels, staffing levels is a 15.5 cent increase from 49.5. So just
That's it. That's again, if you make the assumptions that are on this spreadsheet.
Yeah.
If you make it 6%, like 3 cents less.
Just want to make sure folks know the baseline we're working with.
And again, this is just
These are some.
attempt. I mean, it's not a perfect science and it's not the gospel. We need to assume things. Commissioner Polk pointed out he wants to see history in that. I can provide a lot of that. But again, it's still a guessing game. We've guessed pretty much right in 2015, 2019, 2023, we failed.
Yeah.
And part of that was COVID and working under assumptions that didn't pan out and those kind of things. So, but yeah, the DA's request, if fulfilled within the levy, is going to cost you roughly 2 cents more. Every penny is about $85,000 that it generates. Because by the time this levy took effect, it would be an assessed value of $8,500,000 within the county. Assessor's not here, but I guarantee that's almost exact. It's the same numbers we're using for the fair levy, so assumptions.
Okay. Let's,
You're at the end of the line?
let's jump over to,
Well, in the system, I'm at the end of the line.
let's do the probation now when we're gonna finish up with the sheriff. So Jody,
Well, I mean, to comment on, to follow up with what, DA was saying in regards to a lot of those livability crimes, and also to follow up with Commissioner Polk, is the state has provided funding for community corrections for certain number of cases, and really those have fallen to felony cases. Over the years, they've expanded those to include some misdemeanor cases. But the majority that are impacting our community, that makes our community feel safe, are those cases that the state is now saying, like, well, I've always said, we're not going to fund, but they're actually really pinpointing us on that. Those cases are extremely important in our community.
Here.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm sorry. Sorry.
There you go.
There we go. So those cases are extremely important. Those include a lot of sex offenses. Those include domestic violence cases. DUIs are not something that the state funds for us. Driving offenses, and a lot of those crimes that are really mental health related, the disorderly conducts, the criminal mischiefs, the trespassing, the thefts out of our businesses. Those are something that the state is not willing to fund. But we, in our community as Polk County, believe that those are really important to hold those individuals accountable and get them services, not only supervision, but services. And that's what community corrections provides to them. So with our continued reduction in funding, that's impacting us immensely. We've gone in the 1921 biennium to 10 FTE, and now we are budgeted at 7. I only have 5. And I'm the one struggling now to hire people. And I'm not quite sure what that is, but we are struggling immensely in order to try and get just one position filled, let alone 2. Our caseloads are too high. They're in the high 60s, almost to 70s, and that's a large number for a PO to supervise in the community and prioritize public safety. The state is pushing our programming or our supervision to more administrative, to desk work. They are pushing virtual visits. They're pushing telephone visits, that's how the probationers are supposed to check in with us, or how they would like them to check in with us. We do not do that. We don't believe that that is effective supervision. Anybody can tell you what they're doing or where they may be at on the phone or on a video call. In some instances, that may be appropriate depending on what's happening. But we supervise them in this community. We go to their homes. We are in the community as much as we can be. And we have them in our office. We see them face to face. We're on the phones with family, community members, treatment, employers. We're doing all of that. But we're continuing to get squeezed, which makes it more difficult to really prioritize some of those aspects of supervision. So for us, I would say one of the responses as far as throttling back, if for some reason we run into issues with the levy, the DA's office has to throttle back and lose district attorneys, then that impacts us and our ability to supervise. It obviously impacts us on our ability to file probation violations, any crimes coming into the DA's office, whether or not they can actually be prosecuted and then supervised in the community. I mean, these are serious crimes, domestic violence, stalking, all of those that we may not be able to get on our caseload. And then that would potentially put back to this board the question of, do we want to continue to supervise cases that the state's not paying for? And my preference would be no, of course, but that's not my decision. But that's an impact to our community and safety. And that's something that we hold, I feel I'm going to speak for all of us, we all hold very deeply, is that public safety is a main priority for us in this community, obviously, because it's our profession. But we want to feel safe in our community as well. So we're running into a lot of challenges from a community corrections standpoint from legislature. Obviously, there's other funding streams that we do receive and the county receives that are impacted by legislative changes. One particularly House Bill 3069, and one piece of that is our Measure 57 funding, which was a repeat property crime initiative ballot measure many moons ago. We used to receive that money through the Department of Corrections through this legislative change that has been moved over to the Criminal Justice Commission and is now subject to the impacts of House Bill 3069, which requires that funding to have a 10% holdback for victim services, a 3% holdback for research to the Criminal Justice Commission, and a 15% holdback for an incentive funding. And so this next biennium, that impact alone with just that piece of funding for my department is an $86,000 reduction. And being a small department, that is impactful. And that is over the biennium. So that's almost a half a position for me. And that's what those funds pay for, is the position to supervise those repeat property offenders. That, as District Attorney Felton had mentioned, are those that are below that black line on the grid that we can't quite get to prison, that have really impacted, is stolen somebody's identity or stolen, property, a variety of things that really impact our community and victimize our folks in the community. So not only am I looking at my overall state funding that is impacted, we are always unsure as what's happening with the legislature around our state funding. From last biennium to this biennium, it only increased $10 million. We get 1.5% of that. That's not a lot. We had let the legislature know that we would all be facing reductions across the state. In my office, we eliminated a FTE, and as well as we eliminated treatment services. So we're sex offender treatment and polygraph services we're no longer able to pay for in order to get those services to our clients. And those were for individuals who are unable to pay, which is, I would say, a majority. So we're trying to be creative with that and get them through those treatment services, but that's still a struggle. I mean, if there's not the funds to do that, because those treatment providers need to get paid as well. So they don't provide free service, which is ultimately where we are being pushed with a lot of unfunded mandates, is providing free service. And we're just getting hit left and right by the legislature on a variety of things, eliminating supervision fees, which was something that was a huge budget impact for us, because our community and our clients did a great job of paying their fees and making sure that we were collecting those, so that we've hit budget impacts every year. I feel like since I've been here, that has been a challenge. So we're just continuing to reduce services that we're providing, reducing transitional housing services that we can provide. And then our FTE is reducing, which means our caseloads increase, and that's a struggle for public safety as well. So I would say whatever happens to the district attorney's office will greatly impact the supervision of individuals in the community and the prosecution of those individuals. So if they're not prosecuted, we don't get them, we can't supervise them, we can't help them. So
which option do you choose?
I would like to defer that option. To Mr. Hansen, and I will say,
Pick that answer.
you're not allowed. I would absolutely defer that to Mr. Hansen, as well as you all, because I will be, like, as I had mentioned, the state only pays for certain supervision of crimes. So if we have to get to the point where this levy doesn't pass and we have to throttle back, and my budget's directly impacted, the DA's budget's directly impacted, that he can't prosecute these crimes, then those livability crimes are not going to be supervised because they're not prosecuted. And potentially you would have that question presented in front of you. Do we just stop supervising those? because we are unique in the state that we are one of very few that supervise these unfunded cases because we are prioritizing the safety of our community and public safety. So I would defer that to you all because there is a bigger impact on that I am not an elected to make that decision. So I'm going to defer. I'm sorry.
And again, the second question was about if the first attempt to pass a renewed levy with an increased price doesn't pass, what would you cut? What would you approach the next election with?
What would I cut personally in my?
Well, you're going to work with the administrator, but you know, it's your opinion that matters here in this setting. So what would you change to convince the public to pass it on the second attempt?
What would I change to? I would say my
That's a
budget.
difficult question because she is funded by the state.
Mhm.
If we added her to the levy, then you would remove that element of the levy. She's going to still get state funding. Is it going to be enough to do what we're currently doing? Most likely not, but we can't guarantee it.
We haven't even mentioned juvenile beds and juvenile
No, we
services.
haven't mentioned juvenile services. Yes.
But
just to finish with that, I believe that the response to that is you all would need to make a decision. All of the electeds would need to try and make a decision as to whether or not we continue to supervise DUIs, those unfunded sex offender cases, domestic violence cases, stalking, disorderly conduct, criminal mischief. I mean, that would be something that would be on your plate to then evaluate and make a decision. Because if I'm continually impacted, then that's something that would have to be a consideration. And that, again, would be a huge impact for our community because we do prioritize public safety.
So if we wanted to keep her level of service and the state did cut us back, she would need supplements from the general fund, which most of the time she doesn't need. She has experienced that in the last decade a couple of times. Most of the time, the money from the state has been adequate to fund her. A portion of her 1145 money also funds the jail, about 300,000 to 350,000. So as those things tighten up, you lose elements of revenue in the sheriff's budget in the jail and in hers. You would have to backfill it with general fund money that doesn't exist anymore. So you would have to take it from the DA or the sheriff if you wanted to maintain her services, if the state didn't come through, or other general fund programs, which are probably at the minimum staffing level they can be, with the exception of maybe one. But she does have funding right now that is adequate, but the writing's on the wall. It's not going to be adequate. I would be shocked in 5 years that 1145 was the same that it was intended to be by the promise of the state.
I recall too, in 2024, the state provided grant and aid funding, which is one-time influx of funding, I think 16 million statewide, to fill these gaps because community corrections departments and commissioners were saying, hey, we're in a crisis.
Yep.
Will that happen every short session? I doubt it.
Well, and that goes back to the comment of the cost study from the original agreement with the 1145 was that every 6 years that there would be a cost study done to see how much it actually costs us to supervise individuals in the community. And cost studies have been done over the years, and that 16 million that you just mentioned is the only time that we've actually received a portion of that cost study. So we're operating off of a cost study from 2005. And so, and yes, we've had inflationary increases over the years, but it does not match. We should be being paid over $18 a day per individual in supervision, and we're getting paid $15. And so that $3 range is a lot of money, but that is the price tag that the legislature is kind of like, no, because they don't have to. It doesn't say anything in that 1145 that says they have to fund it. It just says we have to do the cost study. So we go through the whole gamut of doing a cost study. We do time studies. And so it's a lot of extra work for us to do, and then nothing comes of it. And we continue to bring it forward. We continue to bring it forward. Our partners bring it forward to the legislature as well and support us. And it just doesn't happen. And so that 16 million actually was kind of shocking. And then on top of that, to have the governor actually put in recommended budget to provide us additional funds, which also didn't really happen.
That in committee.
Yeah. And so, but there's a great deal of impact from the legislature in regards to community corrections. And so, and they're continuing to push. DA Felton had made a comment about post-prison supervision. So individuals releasing from prison are also ones that we supervise, but they're continuing to push them getting out of prison early. So if the DA is sending them to prison for 5 years, they have the ability to get out early. And then now there's laws on top of that we have, we're mandated to release them from supervision early if they meet all of the criteria that they're supposed to do and there's not any violations. And so they're continuing to cut back our footprint, which is actually, in my view, impacting our community quite a bit more. So these individuals that are going to prison.
That just to add on top of that, there's a lot of momentum this legislative session we've heard around the either early medical release or quote compassionate release, a term that drives me nuts, I will tell you. And that is people who are an aging prison population or otherwise have medical issues that for whatever reason, there is going to be legislation that they should be released early. I don't know what it's going to look like. There's a variety of, but it's possible they may get earlier post-prison supervision, may part of their release. That'll come on Director Merritt's caseload in some form. And how the funding stream is going to look, I have no idea.
No, the funding stream will remain the same.
Bad.
Yes.
Okay. But I mean, and it's not to say there's not an argument that, with the aging Oregon State prison where a lot of that population is housed, there isn't an argument that maybe DOC, and this situation has been around for a decade or longer. And this is not a brand new thing just because the Secretary of State issued an audit a couple of weeks ago saying that Oregon State Penitentiary is falling apart. We've known that for years. But a facility for individuals who are aging within the prison system could be okay. That may be a conversation, but the early release that has challenges and risks of its own.
Yeah. Yes. That's a challenge because they're wanting to obviously push them out into the community, but then there's a hesitancy to support the supervision in the community, but they want them out of prison. So, and when you have somebody in prison for a period of time and they come out, it is quite shocking to the, souls there. So
I mean, nuts because what provision for the victims to be involved? And did anybody tell the victims when they were sentenced, that there may be 10 to 20 years taken off the original sentence and that sort of thing. So there's all these complications around it.
Yeah, the old term, you will die in prison, doesn't necessarily cut it here in Oregon anymore.
I learned, I tell my deputies, never ever tell a crime victim this is exactly what's going to happen. This is how much time they're going to spend if it's a long sentence. This is the best we know today. This is what the sentence is today, but things can change in the future. Legislation can change. This or that can change. So this is what we tell you today. We anticipate the sentences.
yeah.
So Jody, a couple of things. Funding in 2005, was it $12 per parolee?
In 2000, I'd have to go back to I believe so.
It was around 2005. So we
Yeah.
were lobbying for the $18 after this last study.
Mm-hmm.
It's pointed out if you would have had a 3% increase per year since then, you'd be getting $23, $24 an hour per parolee. But yet the study case showed $18 is what we lobbied for the last legislation. And they gave us 15.
Mhm.
So,
It was, I believe, a $38 million price tag.
so in this here, your officers right now are handling 70 clients per officer.
Yep. My active caseloads are, we have a reduced supervision caseload. So those that are doing well, lower risk. That one is at 120. And that is more of a monitoring reactionary caseload. Those are the folks that just made a mistake and oops, and here I am. And so we monitor them monthly with contact. And then if there's an issue, any law enforcement contact, then we kick them up to an active caseload. So those active cases are more of the burglaries, our sex offender caseload, our domestic violence caseload, our downward departure caseload, because we do have individuals who have received probation in lieu of prison, that it's kind of hanging over their head. That caseload actually, that officer actually is one of our highest caseload carrying officers. He's at the 70 mark. And that's just too high because those are medium and high risk individuals. And then on top of that, like the unfunded mandates of the state, we have statewide contact standards now that we're required to do. We have assessment requirements. I mean, we have a lot of that administrative piece that is mandated and not based off of the individual and what's happening with them in the community. You could have a high risk individual that's working, doing well, has turned their life around completely, but they have to be treated the same way the other individual who is not doing what they're supposed to, not showing up, not working, continuing to commit crimes. We have to handle those the same according to the state. So that's really put a burden on the probation officers in order to really kind of focus where they need to focus based off of the individual and what they're doing in our community as far as the safety issue. So we're managing that as best we can, but they keep changing things statewide that really kind of impact us on, that unfunded mandate piece. So.
And then one more question. How often do you utilize the jail for the clients who are not following protocol?
Well, I would say almost daily we are arresting somebody and taking them to jail, sometimes multiple, not to mention the after hours calls that we're receiving and on weekends that we're having our law enforcement partners who are in contact with them in the community because they're doing something unsavory, that we're putting a detainer down and we're having them lodged. So we are utilizing the jail. We do provide funding out of our budget for 1145 for those jail beds. It's not enough, but unfortunately, that's all we got. But thankfully, the sheriff is gracious enough to continue just to let us use those beds as they come through. So.
And if we lose a levy, how would that affect that program?
Well, I would be the sheriff. I mean, we would continue until he told us not to.
1145 money is state money, so that doesn't get affected by the
No.
levy. But
I think the only effect is if something was to impact the levy would to go away and maybe you needed to close a pod and so your jail beds are reduced and then that would obviously squeeze us. We wouldn't want to put added burden. We would have to work together as a team to figure out prioritizing what we're arresting and what we're doing an additional sanction on. But right now, because of our continued squeeze of funding and resources, we're really prioritizing safety to the community, safety to the individual and victims. But we have a zero tolerance for victim contact. So anything that a client has contact with a victim, they're going to jail. And then either we're sanctioning them if they're a post-prison side and they're going back to court if they're on the probation side. So again, impact to the DA's office will impact our ability to really get them to court, hold them accountable. Impact to the jail would be the same. Can we arrest them? Can we put them in jail? Are there jail beds available? I mean, so what impacts them impacts us and then ultimately community all around. So, and on the juvenile side, our detention use is increasing. I will put it out there that the youth in our community are, for whatever reason, we're having an increase of weapon charges with our youth. So our detention beds are getting utilized immensely. On top of that, we have crossovers between DHS and developmental disabled individuals, and there's no services for them for those DD cases in the community. And so A lot of the times they get held up in the court system because they're waiting on assessments. We're waiting on safe placements for them. And we're struggling because there's no safe place for them to go. And so detention is that. And we've run into a number of those cases that we're struggling because detention is not appropriate for them. However, there is not a safe place for them or for whatever home they're in or their community. And so the juvenile court and the DA's office and us are working as best we can, especially with the defense bar on those, trying to get those moved through. But those plug up our beds. And then when you have other situations like the, youth shooting in West Salem, we had another youth step out in West Salem and just fire off a gun. We've had another, the school threats. We're lodging those until we can find a safe place for them and make sure the community is safe on that. So the detention beds are pretty important, but they are very expensive. And we do have a tendency to go over a number of beds, which we contract with Yamhill County because we don't have a detention center here. And so they're very gracious in helping us with that. But then we have to manage those who needs to get out. And those are really difficult decisions. And sometimes we don't make those decisions because it's not appropriate for them to get out. But that's a cost to us as well. And then even on our juvenile side, this budget cycle, we did eliminate an FTE out of our juvenile department, and that has impacted the caseloads, of course. And so that impacts the interactions that our juvenile POs have with the youth, the families, the services that are being provided, because they provide really a holistic supervision and are going to court and reporting back to the juvenile court judge. And so the appropriate decisions are really being made with those cases. And so caseloads are increasing. So there's a lot of stress and added work being put on those POs, and it's impactful, stressful and impactful.
And this portion of your department is almost solely funded with property tax revenues, correct?
It is
Mm-hmm.
80% funded by general fund transfer, which is part of the property taxes is the biggest revenue source within the general fund. So, yeah.
We do receive some state funding for detention beds and a high-risk sex offender PO for the youth. And so that money, unfortunately, too, is being impacted and continuing to be reduced too. So that's not keeping up with the costs, the actual costs in the community. So that's a struggle as well.
Any questions? Okay. Sheriff Garten.
Hi.
Thanks for being patient.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was just going back and looking at some of the past levies, and the lowest dollar figure that we assessed was 42.5 cents. Well, there were times where we assessed lower because we said we would based on income. And it's only got, from the base, it's only gone up 11.5% over 10 years. That is not obviously kept up with any of the costs that we see every day. And so on patrol, 14 police officers is what it covers. In 2023, I had 23 police officers and 4 supervisors, so I had 28 ops. Now I have 23. We have reduced every year multiple positions sometimes to balance the budget. I mean, it's just the way it is. And so our work has not gone down by any means. Our detectives are max capacity in terms of cases, mainly sex abuse, digital cases, all that stuff, digital evidence types cases that are more and more time consuming. We could definitely use the bodies that we lost. But I am realistic in terms of what we can pass. Because if we don't, again, 14 out of my 23 deputies, that's a lot if you do the math. And so I want to go in with my mindset of I want to get the almost not the bare minimum, but like I just want to come in with a realistic cost, showing what we've done to decrease costs. That I've lost 5 cops over the last 4 years. Our costs have gone up however many percent, yet we were only increased by 11.5 over 10 years. And so I don't want to necessarily add new bodies to the levy because I know how much it hurts the people to have to pay it. And if we go out too high in May, I will probably reduce 24/7 patrols shortly thereafter because I'm gonna have people leaving. We're gonna have hundreds of thousands of dollars walking out the door every week. And so again, I don't want to go in asking for extras. We've done everything within the sheriff's office that we can do to reduce our costs, to say, hey, this is the bare minimum number of people that we need to do our job, which is where we're at. Bottom line. So option 1 for me, for the sheriff's office. So our public safety is so different here, for the better, by for sure better, because I hear other police chiefs and other sheriffs and other counties talk about the things they deal with and the waste sometimes that I'm like, man, I wish I had 1/10 of what they have for their one line item, and so sometimes people don't understand. They see those and they assume that's the way, but look at our data. Look at the number of people we've lost in the last 5 years, even with the levy. And we're just maintaining, and we have to at least maintain. And whether property tax revenue increases, over the 5 years to get us to a point where we can maybe in year 3 or 4 open up for if there is some kind of growth that we could relook at something. I don't know if that's even doable in a levy like that, but that's my train of thought. In the jail, so originally it was 3 deputies and 2 CTs. And I don't know if we've blended those now, but
We converted.
it's five people, 5.
There's 5 in the jail.
Yeah. And so I really couldn't lose any more in the jail. It's not like I can close a pod and reduce staff. It's the way the jail's set up is just not a thing that we could do. I'd probably have to move, if we lost people, I'd have to move some folks on patrol over to the jail to maintain that, because we have to do that. Our numbers are going to stay very similar over there. So again, that's probably why I would have to reduce on the patrol side to cover and do the mandated functions. So questions? Down and dirty.
No, it jumped right out with answering my question right from the get-go, so.
Appreciate that. And I think it just highlights the fact that we are already operating at a pretty slim personnel margin. In fact, you have less personnel in the field and in the office than every other county. If you look at population and geographic range, you are structurally understaffed. And I just think that's good to know, because I think as we're talking about this, we're all thinking about risk assessment to the system, to the safety of the public, with the honor of knowing that every cent that we levy to the public is precious. So I appreciate all of you looking at that balance. And I think as we look to land on a number, we're going to be considering all of that. But I personally do not want to live in a county that does not receive 24/7 coverage.
We've been there.
I don't want to live in a county that can't prosecute crimes at a rate that I would be comfortable with should I be a victim or a loved one be a victim. And I don't want our supervisory system to be such that it increases recidivism, increases reoffense. So we're already working at the bare minimum. So I appreciate that.
I would add one more just information for the public or people that are listening. from 2013 to 2015, we didn't have 24/7. We worked 10 hours. We worked noon to 10 p.m. That's what we did. That's all we had. We had 7 or 8 folks left. That was one of them. Every night we would get called out in the middle of the night to go handle a serious person crime, and then come back to work at noon and work a 10-hour shift. And that's just, that's not awesome by any means. So we were there. We've been there. That's why the levy is here. It's not additional. It's fixing the problem we had between 2013 and 2015.
I've heard that the phrase, we do more with less. I mean, before I even took this job, it's been around a long time, and yeah, that's true. But I like the phrase, this county punches above its weight every time. We really, really do. And all 3 of us, I look at it, all of us, and I've been in these conversations where we all try to think about how we can do this with what we have and with the people we have. And they're really smart people. They work really hard. I mean, I remember having the conversation, one of the first levy re-ups, and I was concerned that I didn't want to ask for too much. And I think it's one time that Mr. Hansen's chided me about I should have asked for a little bit more, because it was probably the timing was right. Probably the timing isn't right to ask for more, because I know that economics times are much worse now than they were a few years back. But I can't not put it out there for folks, because I've said this before, this business that we do, it's more expensive than we care to talk about, and it's getting more expensive. There are things happening that are out of our control in terms of the demands that the state's putting on us. And the thing I talked about, the medical release, which could release more people, because it's not simply how it's defined as a piece of legislation that will apply only to the most extreme cases, which everyone would agree, maybe. It'll be a wide net, I'm afraid, which will release a lot of folks back into the community, potentially, if it passes. There are expectations. The cases that we try, the most severe homicides, the one that I tried took 3 prosecutors ultimately to do, intensive amount of law enforcement to do. Mr. Wilson tried a case to success in an officer-involved shooting that had 20 law enforcement victims or so. That was an intensive amount of resources. And the defense has all the resources it needs economically. It takes everything we have financially. And that's true with small counties around the state. And that's just an extreme example. A sex abuse case, hire an expert, it's incredibly expensive. That's county dollars. One of the great things Mr. Hansen told me when I started this business is, if you need it for a complex case to hire an expert, whatever you need, Polk will find the money. Well, I've always had that in my back pocket. We've used it. But I'm afraid at some point the well's going to run dry when we're not going to have the resources to compete on I don't know when that is going to be. I've been selective. I'm not asking for that. But it's getting more and more. Digital technology is getting more expensive. Being able to experience costs, experienced detectives costs to keep, because DOJ and other places know talent, and they can pay for talent. And so we compete against that. So having this baseline of public safety, which we've paid for so far and invested in, we're struggling to keep it. We all could use more people to be commensurate with counties of similar to our size. But we have created a culture. And again, I say, thank God the majority of people in Polk County know nothing about it, because they've been safe as a result of it. They don't need the public safety system. But when you need it, you really, really need it. And you need someone to come at 3 o'clock in the morning when there's a problem. And you need someone in my office to prosecute that problem, hold somebody accountable. You need someone when they're on supervision to lock them up when they don't follow the rules. And that's what's at risk. Thank you.
So Sheriff Grant, I got just a couple of, just mainly for the public to understand. First off, medical program in the jail. Can you explain to the public how that works?
The medical program?
Yes, for our inmates.
Okay.
And then the impacts it's had on us in the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah. you lose your health insurance, whatever health insurance you have, state funded, OHP, whatever employer, you lose that when you walk through the doors in the jail. That's state statute. That's nothing we do. We pay out of pocket for any medical costs, like for emergency room visits, anything like that. The only time that we're able to defray those costs, the state will pick them up, is if that person gets admitted into the hospital, which does not happen very often, but I'm glad that it does when the times happen because it's a significant thing. We have in the jail, we have one nurse manager and then a combination of, well, we had an EMT, he just recently left, an EMT, LPNs, and an RN. Kind of a combination of those. And we also have a contracted part-time doctor that comes in once a week to see inmates for office visit type of things. So we don't have to send them out. It's much more, we can control the cost. So we pay, most of the time they'll ask for us to pay, MSRP on things. We sometimes end up having to do that. Sometimes we can negotiate a lower rate. Salem Health, our major partner in that, is still not, interested in getting a contract with us, but we're also just paying, we kind of changed how we're paying those bills and kind of basically paying 53% of the bill is what the public gets to pay if they don't have insurance. And so we're paying that, and so far so good. So we are, again, all the time looking for ways to reduce the cost, because prior to that, I think Mr. Hansen said our budget was about $500,000 5 years ago. Now it's $1 million, pretty close. And our people that are coming into the facility are sicker. They have multiple types of issues. And so they're just sicker. And we're on the hook for it. Medications, we can't just stop people on medications if they're on it on the outside and there's some medical reason. So we have to maintain all that, and it costs money. Health insurance is expensive, or not health insurance, health coverage is expensive. But we do everything we can to keep things in-house because that's the only way we can help control those costs.
And right now you're down 5 people.
No, we're not. We're technically full staff, but over the last 5 years, we've lost 5 police officers. Yes.
Okay. And we have 2 positions open that you can't fill because of budget restraint right now. Is that correct?
No.
Nope.
No.
We're good.
So from 2015, we had levy positions and we had general fund positions. The general fund was healthier. And so we added positions beyond what we did with the levy. Most of those, if not all of those positions, have been eliminated. And that's what he's talking. We built it up and now we're unfortunately tearing it down or reducing it. He still has his levy positions, but all the additional general fund, priorities in the general fund tend to be public safety and then everyone else. Jody just mentioned that we reduced 1 in juvenile. That's a general fund supported program, 80%. We reduced 1 in the assessor's office recently in this budget. The sheriff has experienced reductions. We haven't laid people off. We have not filled open positions.
Knowing that our next budget.
That they were going to be, the captain and the sheriff will come to me and say, hey, where are we? And I'll tell them in January, if you have an opening, please don't fill it. Because we don't know where we're going to be.
And that's an every year thing.
and recently that's been an every year thing. And so that's where we are. We had a big discussion this last budget year involving a different pot of money in that. If we fail this levy in May, we will have to have some serious reductions again, or look at that other pot of money to consider to backfill. And that's a one-time pot. Once that pot's gone, it's all gone. It will only be reductions and reductions. So can we maintain 24/7 patrol in 27, 28 if we fail? Maybe, but probably not.
I'd have 7 people left on patrol if
Yeah.
eliminating those
We
14.
do have the levy for one more year, but it's not adequate to fund at this level. So that 14 of the 19 that the levy produces, the sheriff is correct. We cannot reduce staffing in our jail because we're at minimum staffing. He has to provide court security. He has to do other things with that staff. And it's designed whether we have 30 people in there or 130 people in there. That's how we build it. It's the least cost, and that's why we built it in 96 or got approval in 96, opened it in 98. But he will suffer. Will he only be noon to 10? No, he may be able to cover, but there will be gaps in coverage is my guess
For sure.
in 27, 28 if we fail.
And that's where I was going at. These 5 positions, had the levy carried all the way through, we'd still have 28 officers.
If the general fund, ability of the general fund would have continued, he would have 26 to 28, somewhere in there probably. But he doesn't have that currently, and only downward decline unless we have replacement revenue.
So if we stay option 1, will we be in the same boat at the end of that levy where we're down officers?
Well,
'Cause we don't have-
depends how well our assumptions were made to begin with. If, let's just say we went with the 8% increase in expenses. If they were 6%, he may be able to fund 1 or 2 more deputies, because that's a lot of money. If it's 10%, by the end of year 4, we'll be out, and we'll be cutting like we have been this last round. It all depends on what happens. That's why you don't have a crystal ball. So if you pass a levy, obviously that's the most you can levy. If you do get additional funding, if you do get this, and you don't have to levy the full amount. But again, you can make that statement, but I can't hold a future board and budget committee to that. It's up to them. We have reduced at the start of the first public safety levy. We did reduce with O&C funding. That was a 45-cent levy technically, but we only levied between 34 and 39 cents because of the funding that we received. Since then, we've gone 42.5 to 49.5 to whatever we decide to go out for in May of 27. So it's all about, if for some reason he has openings and he can't find bodies to fill it, we save money because there's open positions. That's what happened during COVID. We were saving massive money because they just weren't available. People were scared to leave what they had and they weren't willing to, move. We passed the levy in 23 during COVID. We were sitting on big reserves. We didn't need more than the 49.5. At least that's what we thought. We thought wrong. I'll admit that and that. So, but we're here again. We have to pick a number. We have to decide. That final decision is going to lay on the shoulders of the BOC. And then you'll have to go out and do your best to inform the public and make your pitch. And hopefully they see it as you do and it becomes successful. But, if there's extra money in the general fund, it tends to go to public safety. And if there isn't money in the general fund, public safety, because they have the biggest part of the general fund, they tend to receive the reductions. It's just the reality. And on the medical side, I'll tell you, I juggle the cost technically that the sheriff pays between public health, which is somewhat general fund supported, and the jail. This last year, he's going to spend $920,000, but I didn't charge out the last $65,000 per month for 3 months. He would have been 1.1 million. because public health had adequate funds to,
At the time.
yeah. They aren't gonna in the future. I have that. I will have to charge the full amount. So next year, his medical could go up to 1.2, 1.3. It just,
That's not a fixed cost. That's a variable cost.
and unless there's changes in the law that allow for health insurance to continue with incarceration, you're gonna eat,
Almost there last year.
They were close.
you're going to have that increase, you know? And I don't even try to build that into this levy because this is mostly people levy, but it's a cost that the general fund has to support, and the sheriff can't just say, oh, we're not gonna provide it, because then you get lawsuits and it costs you even more. So it's just, unfortunately, Polk County does not have an adequate tax base to cover the current costs of operations anymore. We've done our best for as long as we could, but it's a new reality. Unfortunately, you're seeing more money ballot measures on the election cycle. And it's going to continue that way until there's reforms or some kind of change. I wish it wasn't, but I think that's the reality that we have to live with.
I will just quickly add that we have looked for grant funding to help subsidize what we have. That we don't, I can't sign those documents because it says it mandates for us to do things that is illegal under state law. So we wouldn't even be eligible for COPS grants or anything like that because we'd have to not cooperate with, well, we have to cooperate with ICE, I guess is the easy way to say it. So it's not something we can do.
So the reason I asked those questions, point out, is I want people to understand all of those expenses and costs and the volatility that we face on up or down. We don't know what tomorrow holds. But going into a first year of a 5-year levy, not giving you a cushion or stipend to offset those over high expenses, then we start cutting cops right away. And that's where I'm hoping everybody considers what we're doing and looking at the big picture, is we don't have the crystal ball, but we also know that our public safety relies on funding, and they got to have adequate funding so we can keep officers. When those officers walk out of the thing, what's it cost to get an officer in a car today?
125 grand.
125 grand for hire to where he's out alone on the road by himself. In about a year's time,
Full cost of a deputy with overtime, operating cars, equipment, everything, you're probably getting closer now to $180,000 a person. Yeah. Fully loaded. And that is going to go up
And we
5 or 6%.
we have more senior staff too. I mean, we have kept a good core of people around.
The luxury, I don't know if it was a luxury, but obviously when we had reduced all of our staff at the beginning of the operating levy, when we hired 14, 15 deputies, we were able to hire them at step one. Not that the public knows how pay scales work at the government level, but we got a lot, but we couldn't even hire that many at the start because we couldn't get them into training. It was a phased element of that first levy because of that. Now we have more senior deputies. They're at the higher pay scale and they cost more, you know, every time they work overtime at the higher level, it's higher.
It doesn't show up in the balance sheet, but an added benefit to the community for experience.
Right.
Folks who are in community and were trained and raised in Polk County. So,
Right.
yeah.
You know, it takes them, if they're brand new to the county, never been here, never lived here, it probably takes them at least 2 years to be even super effective, to get through DPSST and to be solo and to do all those and gain all that community, you know, support and understanding and everything. And when you lose them, it's a loss.
Hurt.
And you start over.
So community corrections, when you hire an officer, how long does it take for you to let him run solo? When,
Our probationary period's 18 months. Usually at the year mark, we're starting to let them have their own autonomy under reduced supervision, I guess is the right way to say that. But they're with a training officer for 18 months. Our academy is only offered twice a year. And so depending on when we hire them, either we put them right into academy or have them on the job training before they go to the academy. So it just depends on where they're at in training and how quick we can get them to start actual caseload work.
any questions, guys?
I have nothing but political statements from this point forward. I'll hold them.
So community corrections, Jody Merritt, Aaron Felton, Sheriff Margaret, thank you all three for what you do for us in public and keeping us safe, and we'll move forward and see if we can find correct answers and right funding for this.
Commissioners, and we also, the public knows how to get a hold of us if they have more questions, information-based questions about the levy or what we do.
People are aware how to do that.
Yes, they are. Yes, they are.
Mr. Pope said this is the first of many conversations.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you for your time.
Any non-listed items today?
Yes, sir.
With that, we're adjourned.